The film opens with a fisherman named Syracuse casting his nets into the water. Suddenly, he hauls up his net and discovers a woman's body inside. Upon closer inspection, he realizes the woman is alive. He carefully lifts her from the net and performs mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to help her regain consciousness, then assists her in expelling the water from her lungs. He tells her that she is alive, but she struggles to believe it, expressing that she thought for sure she was dead. He wraps her in a blanket to warm her up and informs her that he will take her to a hospital. The woman, however, is reluctant about the idea. She claims she is fine, but he insists that she needs to see a professional after an incident like that. Despite his concerns, she remains adamant that she cannot see anyone. As a boat passes by, she ducks down to avoid being spotted. Syracuse asks her name, but she responds that she doesn't know. Assuming she must have hit her head and lost her memory, he introduces himself as Syracuse. However, he claims people call him Circus, suggesting he's a clown. Understanding her desire to remain hidden, he takes her to his late mother's abandoned house in a remote area. He gives her his lunch and asks if she'll be all right alone, as he has somewhere to be. She replies that she will be fine, which surprises him, but he leaves nonetheless. Later, Syracuse arrives at his ex-wife's house to pick up his daughter, Annie, who is attending her dialysis appointment. Annie is disabled, and he carries her. He asks her if anything strange or wonderful has happened to her lately, and she wonders why he always asks that. He explains that he always hopes for something weird or wonderful to occur. During the dialysis, Annie asks Syracuse to tell her a story. He shares a fisherman's tale of catching a woman in his net. Syracuse doesn't understand her question when she asks what kind of creature the woman is. Annie inquires if the woman is a mermaid or a selkie, but he admits he can't say for sure. Afterwards, Syracuse gets Annie an automatic wheelchair to help her move around. He brings her home where his ex-wife Maura informs him that Annie needs a kidney transplant, but the doctor still hasn't found a match. Syracuse returns to the mysterious woman and is surprised to find she is still there. She questions his surprise, and he replies that he is half sure he dreamt the entire experience. As he prepares to go fishing, the woman asks if she can join him. Initially, he warns her that having a woman on a fishing boat brings bad luck, but he changes his mind and takes her along. Syracuse struggles to catch anything as usual. He asks the woman if she remembers her name, and she tells him to call her Ondine. Curious, he asks what that means, and she explains that it is the name of a woman from the sea. Then she begins to sing a beautiful song in an unknown language. As she sings, Syracuse pulls up his lobster trap and finds that he has caught several lobsters, which surprises him. He throws in another trap but pulls it up empty. Then he asks Ondine to sing again. As she sings, he throws in the trap again and pulls it up to discover he has caught several lobsters again. He realizes that she seems to bring him good luck. Syracuse teaches her how to tie the lobster's claws. She asks if he usually catches this many, and he replies that it rarely happens. Afterwards, Syracuse mentions that they will go and sell the lobsters in town, and Ondine will receive her share for her singing. Ondine says she won't go with him because she doesn't want people to see her. He says he has seen her, but she insists he is the only one who gets to. Syracuse sells the lobsters and uses the money to buy a dress for Ondine. He also swipes some women's underwear. Later, he visits Annie at school and continues the story he told her during her dialysis. He explains that the mystery woman from the sea sings in an unknown language and attracts all the lobsters nearby, making it easier for fishermen to catch them. Annie concludes that she is definitely a selkie, a mythical creature that is half woman, half seal, who sheds their seal coats when they come ashore. The song the selkie sings is a form of communication used to talk to other sea creatures. Annie seems skeptical and follows him as he drives away. When Syracuse arrives at his mother's home, he finds Ondine trying on her old shoes. She appears to struggle with tying the laces, which he finds odd. He gives her the dress he bought, and she kisses him in gratitude. He asks her how long she plans to stay, and she replies that it will depend on him. He responds that if it depends on him, she can stay forever. Meanwhile, Annie secretly observes the situation and researches selkies to determine what is happening. Later, Syracuse arrives at a church to confess. He tells the priest that he is an alcoholic who has been sober for over 2 years, but his ex-wife still drinks, and he wants to free his daughter from her influence. The priest suggests connecting him with a counselor, but Syracuse refuses. Syracuse confesses that he stole some women's underwear and assures him that it's not what he thinks and starts to explain about Ondine. When the father inquires further, Syracuse doesn't reveal where he keeps her. The father requests that Syracuse update him on any developments in the case. Meanwhile, Ondine tries on the underwear but ultimately decides not to wear any for her swimming photo shoot. As she emerges from the water, Annie is there waiting for her. Annie claims she knew her dad didn't make up the story and that Ondine is a real Selkie. She realizes that Annie is Syracuse's daughter. Annie then asks Ondine if she has magical powers and if she can help her get better. When Ondine asks what's wrong with her, Annie reveals that she has kidney failure. Noticing that Ondine is cold, Annie points out that Selkies belong underwater. Ondine admits she doesn't understand what Annie is talking about, but Annie insists that she has done her research, so it's best if they don't lie to each other. She explains that Selkies can live on land for 7 years if they bury their seal coats there, and during that time they will shed 7 tears. However, they can find unexpected happiness with a man after that period. As Annie starts to leave, Ondine kisses her, saying she looks forward to seeing her again. Meanwhile, Syracuse arrives at the library to check out books about Selkies, only to find that Annie has already borrowed them. He offers to retake Ondine's fishing, but she insists that she will only go if he promises to be the only one who sees her. He agrees to this promise. While fishing, the fisherman's patrol passes by, and Ondine ducks to hide. She skillfully steers the boat with her feet as Syracuse casts his line. When Ondine sings, he is amazed to catch a large number of salmon, even though he is trawling, which is not typically how salmon are caught. Usually a gill net is used for that purpose. As the patrol approaches Syracuse's boat to investigate how he saw so many salmon, they check his gill net for moisture and soon spot Ondine hiding, which shocks them. Once they leave, Ondine realizes that it is no longer worth hiding. Syracuse arrives in town with Ondine and everyone stares at her. He tells her it's a small town and they rarely see anyone as beautiful as her. He takes her shopping and a crowd gathers as she tries new clothes. Meanwhile, Syracuse and Annie talk about how he found Ondine near Seal Rock, which makes sense since she is a Selkie. Later, Annie and Ondine are at the old house when Annie reveals that she doesn't know how to swim. Ondine decides to teach her, but while doing so, she notices something in the water and quickly pulls Annie out. Ondine dives in and retrieves the object. When Annie sees it, she asks if it is Ondine's seal coat, and Ondine quickly agrees. Annie suggests they bury the mysterious object so Ondine can remain on land for 7 years. Annie loves the idea, and together they bury it while Ondine makes Annie promise not to reveal its location. Afterwards, Annie, Ondine, and Syracuse head to the sea. Annie explains to Syracuse that Ondine can live with a landsman for 7 years unless her Selkie husband comes to claim her. She also mentions that Selkies can grant wishes, but Ondine insists that she is not a Selkie and asks Annie to stop with the assumptions. Meanwhile, a suspicious-looking dark-haired man arrives in town searching for someone specific. Annie jumps into the water to test her claim of not being a Selkie. Ondine dives in to save her, which confirms Annie's beliefs about Ondine's true nature. Later, Syracuse takes Annie home where her mother warns her about the suspicious man looking for Ondine. However, he does not use her name. When Syracuse and Ondine arrive back home, she asks him why people call him Circus the Clown. He explains that it was due to his past drinking and reckless behavior. When Ondine inquires what prompted his change, he reveals a painful memory. One day he returned home to find Annie unconscious and her mother passed out from drinking. Realizing that someone needed to be sober to take care of Annie, he made a decision to change. However, his wife eventually left him, and because he was just a fisherman, the government denied him custody of Annie. After sharing this sad story, the two share an intimate moment. Later, Syracuse goes to church to confess. He tells the priest that he is scared because Ondine brings him luck, and he is beginning to have hope again. Yet he fears this could lead to something wonderful or terrible. Outside the church, the suspicious man waits for Syracuse and asks about the lady he found in the ocean. Syracuse refuses to answer. Meanwhile, as Ondine sleeps, she notices headlights approaching the house. Realizing it is the suspicious man, she quickly runs away and hides. Meanwhile, Syracuse picks up Annie after her dialysis appointment and takes her home, only to find the house locked. The keys are with his wife at a bar, and reluctantly, he has to leave Annie with her, even though he doesn't want to. When Syracuse arrives home, he discovers that it is completely wrecked. Worried about Ondine, he goes out searching for her. He eventually finds her hiding and asks what happened. She explains that the Selkie husband Annie mentions has come to take her back. Syracuse asks why she can't simply tell him to go away, and she responds that it's not that simple. Jokingly, he suggests that since Ondine can grant wishes, she should wish for him to disappear. Instead, Ondine wishes that Annie would no longer be sick. Syracuse then wishes that Ondine would stay with him forever. Meanwhile, Annie's mother Maura is driving her home but is drunk and crashes into another car, which turns out to belong to the suspicious man. Maura's boyfriend Alex is thrown from the windshield and falls to his death, Syracuse and Ondine arrive at the scene, and Syracuse rushes to check on his daughter. At the hospital, the doctor informs Syracuse that Alex has a donor card and, surprisingly, is a blood tissue match for Annie. They proceed with the transplant. Meanwhile, Ondine encounters the suspicious man, and during their conversation, it becomes clear that they are involved in something illegal together. Syracuse attends Alex's funeral, where he pushes his ex-wife's wheelchair around. When they reach the wake, Maura insists that he have a drink in Alex's honor. Although he hesitates, he ultimately succumbs to the temptation. Maura tells him that while she is in the wheelchair, Annie should live with him, but he must get rid of Ondine. She claims that Ondine initially brings good luck, but eventually leads to bad luck. Syracuse ends up drinking an entire bottle of alcohol. He returns to the boat wholly drunk and takes Ondine to Seal Rock. There, he sits her down and pretends to return to the ship to fetch another bottle, but instead, he leaves her alone. Ondine desires to say goodbye to Annie, but Syracuse ignores her. He insists that their kids don't belong together and that she should stay and sing to the seals. Later, Syracuse wakes up in a tree, and the father comes to help him down. Syracuse then picks up Annie from the hospital and brings her home. She asks where Ondine is, and Syracuse tells her that Ondine's Selkie husband has claimed her. Annie replies that she will return because something of hers is still here. Later, while Annie is watching TV, one of the channels shows a band performing at a concert. Syracuse recognizes the song as one that Ondine sang on his boat. Realizing it is an actual song, he understands she is a natural person, not just a Selkie. In a rush, he searches for her and finds her at Seal Rock. He demands that she tell him the truth, and she reveals that she is a prisoner and a drug carrier from Romania. His partner, Vladic, was with her when the Irish Coast Guard apprehended them both. He forced her to take the drugs and swim away. Although she is a good swimmer, the Irish waves overwhelmed her, which is when Syracuse came to her rescue. When Syracuse asks for her real name, she tells him it's Joanna. Later, Joanna and Syracuse return home, only to find Vladic already there. Vladic and his accomplice threaten to shoot Syracuse and Annie unless Joanna reveals the location of the drugs. Joanna leads Vladic to where she buried the drugs, but to her dismay, she discovers that they have been moved. Annie then admits that she relocated the seal coat because she didn't want anyone to find it, fearing it would mean she would have to leave. Joanna promises to stay if Annie reveals the coat's location, and Annie discloses that she hid it in the lobster pot. They all head to the boat, and just as Vladic pulls the lobster pot up, Joanna uses the rope he is standing on to push him and his accomplice into the water. Unable to swim, they drown. Afterwards, the police take Joanna into custody while Syracuse and Annie return home. Syracuse revisits the church to confess. He shares that Joanna's court date is next week, and since she is a non-national, she will be deported. However, if she were to obtain nationality, she could stay, but someone would have to marry her. The priest smirks and muses about who that might be. Later, Annie helps Joanna into her wedding dress as Syracuse arrives in a fancy suit. The three of them set off on the boat towards the wedding ceremony, with all the fishermen in town watching as Syracuse kisses his stunning sea creature bride-to-be.